Hello and welcome to the BCM Game of the Month, this time for December 2014. And as usual, it's International Master Andrew Martin reporting. Now, of course, November has seen an incredible amount of high-class chess all the way around the world. We've all been enthralled by the goings-on in Sochi, and congratulations to Magnus Carlsen on his recent triumph, retaining his World Championship title against Vishy Anand. But the game I've chosen is not from that match because, frankly, the games have been so well covered on the internet, it's difficult to beat the coverage. You know, you've got all manner of high-class commentators covering that match. So I've chosen a game from the match between Hikaru Nakamura and Nakamura-Aronian, the so-called Showdown in St. Louis, which is actually taking place as I record. This features a 4-game classical match and a 16-game blitz match, which is taking place between the 21st and the 25th of November 2014. And we're going to focus on the first classical game. Nakamura was white and he opened with 1d4. And Nakamura-Aronian got the chance to play his favourite system, which is kind of a hybrid of the Nakamura-Aronian and the Queen's Gambit, where after knight c3, black plays bishop b4. Now in some circles this is known as the Rogozin system. In some circles, the Westphalia variation. It all depends which central break black is going to try to achieve. If he sticks with c5, then that really is the Westphalia variation. If he goes for e5, possibly via knight c6 and then e5, this then is more Rogozin-like. This is how Rogozin used to play the variation. Well, in this position, of course, white can more or less force black to play a Rogozin position by going queen a4 check here. That's one of the lines. And then black's forced to play knight c6 to protect his bishop. But quite often white doesn't want to commit his queen so early here. So you routinely see c takes d5 as the main line. And when black recaptures, then white puts his bishop out on g5. Reaching a position which is kind of characteristic of the Queen's Gambit, well, here black generally goes with the move c5. He could play h6 first or knight bd7, but c5 is his main thinking. So let's just drop back to bishop b4. What else is there? Well, I remember seeing a blitz game actually between Sairawan and Aronian just before the Nakamura match, where white plays c takes d5, black recaptured. Now white played queen a4 check, dragging the knight out to c6 and bishop g5. You can't help but feel though here that black doesn't have too many troubles once his bishop on c8 has been released early in the game. Nevertheless, white went on to win that game. But Nakamura, confronted with a pet variation of the opponent, just simply plays bishop d2. And if it wasn't Nakamura, I would have to say that that looks far too passive. But curiously, it has been played quite a bit recently. Now, bishop d2 against the Nakamura-Aronian in this particular position, it doesn't look like much. But I suppose that white is asking what black's going to do if he plays a3. That's the main point, I think, behind bishop d2. And also, just to get an unusual position, you know, Nakamura... at least he plays very interesting chess. You know, a lot of people just trot out their favourite systems, go down the same old tram lines. Nakamura's always looking for new ideas or different ideas to spice the game up. Now, you could scarcely believe that bishop d2 is the prelude to an exciting game, but in fact it turns out like that, as Aronian just decides to answer bishop d2 by castling. Now, believe it or not, my computer program, DeepFritz13 as it happens, is recommending that black take the pawn here. After which I suppose white's going to go e3. And then we have a choice. I think black can play kind of like the Nakamura-Aronian here by going c5. And I suppose after that, white is going to go a3. When black's got to make quite a difficult choice already. Does he really want to surrender the bishop here in this position? Or, as the computer rather strangely says, bishop takes c3. And after bishop takes c3, queen to d5. I mean, black had to have a move like that prepared. if he's going to take on c3 so early, because that's a massive concession in this position, giving up the dark square bishop. This bishop on c3 could become incredibly strong. But Deep Fritz thinks it's actually quite difficult for white to get any sort of advantage here. Obviously white can go after the pawn on c4, and then black's going to respond with knight c6, with, I presume, a quick e5. Clearly white can play the knight to e5 as well, and after knight c6 take on c4. How big is white's advantage after a sequence, say, like this? I mean, I can see why Aronian doesn't play this way, because there's every danger that this bishop on c3 could become incredibly strong. But for the time being, you know, black is kind of restraining white's centre, and he's got quite good development. Well, really strong players don't like to commit themselves like that, so black castles, nothing wrong with that. And white just continues with his same very quiet play, e3. Rook to e8. Okay, well, I'm guessing that that's not the first move that's going to come to everybody's mind. It's not a bad move. It just keeps the game on the boil. I mean, I think one of the main points behind it is that black is creating a retreat square for this bishop on b4. He knows white's going to play a3, so he makes bishop f8 possible. Now, clearly it's a question of taste as to how you continue here, because c5 must be a move as well. And then we get a typical sequence after that. White takes on d5, he plays a3, and black can surrender the bishop in this position and then play knight e4. And to me, this position looks pretty equal. White can't really keep his bishop pair, and black's got good freedom of movement in the style of the Nimzo Indian, or Bogo Indian in fact. So that was definitely an alternative. But by playing rook e8, Aronian says, well, you know, I'm quite happy with the complex game, with all the pieces on the board, and I don't think my position's too bad at all. And indeed, it turns out that way after a3 by Nakamura, and black puts his bishop back on f8, whereupon white plays rook to c1. So just steady play by white, but this bishop d2 and e3 combination, it does look rather too quiet to claim any sort of advantage. So black plays knight b d7. Again, there were other moves. White just goes bishop e2, keeping all the pieces on, and black plays a6. Well, a6 is a typical prelude to a sequence like d takes c4, and then black's going to follow up with b5 gaining a move, and then c5, after which, well, frankly, he's going to have a very satisfactory game. So white moves to intercept that straight away by blocking the queen side with c5. But already when I see this move, I can't help but feel, what about e5? I mean, that's the move that black is leading up to. By the way, Aronian didn't do that. To me, that looks perfectly natural. And after castles, maybe black could even play h6 in this position. Again, a useful move, just giving his king a bit of air, keeping a white piece out of g5. And if b4, jab at the pawns with a5. b5 by white, takes, knight e4. Black seems to me to have pretty good counterplay here. But it's a fact, actually, that in this particular position after c5, black's got more than one good move, and the move Aronian plays is perfectly good, c6. Just halting the white pawn advance in its tracks. Well, white can still advance on the queen side, of course, but black's going to get a quick e5 in, and it takes white ages to arrange the move b5. So Nakamura changes tack with knight a4, black puts the knight in on e4, white castles, and now straightforward play by Aronian, he takes on d2. White recaptures with the knight, and now e5. So there we are, and I think black is relatively happy here. He's played his free break. Of course, he's still got the issue of what he does with his queenside pieces. But now, curiously, it's black who's got the bishop pair, not white. So Nakamura probably took a look at this position and recognised that he didn't really have very much. And if he didn't do something quite quickly, actually, it could become worse for him. The position could become bad, with black just thinking about g6, bishop g7, and then this bishop on f8, the dark square bishop, could become very strong. So Nakamura tries to mix things up by playing e4. D takes e4. Okay, well you'd think with a dark squared bishop there lurking on f8 it would make sense to take on d4 first. But then I suppose white takes on d5, giving black a pawn weakness. And maybe Aronian just didn't want that. What he plays, again, is perfectly satisfactory for black. He takes on e4 and he sticks his queen out on h4. So black is now starting to get aggressive. And white has got to be really careful. So f3, protecting the knight, and now e takes d4 by black, weakening the pawn on c5, opening up the game. But here I wonder, actually, looking at this position, whether f5 was not a decent move as well. And again, I can understand why Aronian doesn't do that, because it is committal. You know, it burns black's bridges. White can play g3, stick the bishop out on c4, and maybe knight f2. But even here, you know, black is fine. He takes on d4 now, and then knight e5. Maybe Aronian just did not want to weaken his kingside at this point in time. So instead, going back to the game, he took on d4. White recaptured. Sorry, white played bishop c4 first. Black played knight f6, and white played knight into b6. Rook went to b8. Knight takes c8, rook b takes c8, and now the delayed capture, which I was referring to earlier, on d4, queen takes d4, whereupon black took on e4, and now f takes e4. So what we've got here is basically an opposite colour bishop middle game, where white is trying to take advantage of the weakness of the square f7. The f-file's opened up, the white pieces are zeroing in on f7. But at the same time, if black can cover f7, then black has got every chance of gaining the advantage himself, because the white pawns are so weak, and in particular this pawn on e4 is very, very weak indeed. The pawn on c5 is also a little bit tender, and I'm not sure tactically that I like the idea that white's queen and king are on the same colour as black's bishop on f8. So all in all, it's quite a difficult and interesting situation, despite the fact that three pairs of minor pieces have been exchanged. And here, Aronian decided to defend f7 economically by playing rook c7. Now clearly, he could have tried rook takes e4, but I don't think that's very good in this particular position, because black has queen d7 to worry about. And although black can take on c5 here, after the capture and king h1, I think there are too many problems to solve. White has back rank ideas. He's hitting f7. Clearly, if black takes on c4, we've got queen f7, and then the queen comes back to take on c4. So black's probably got to defend with rook f8, but even there, bishop takes f7 check, and then rook takes c5 with a winning position. So that's why rook c7 was played. White played rook ce1, and black put his rook on d8, attacking the queen. It's more difficult than it looks for white to marshal his forces against f7. It seems like a straightforward matter for white to just put all three major pieces in the f-file and take f7. But the more you look at the position, the more actually you realise it's not that easy at all. For instance, the white queen has got to keep an eye on c5 to start off with. Queen to h6. Well, black's in quite a hurry to exchange the queens, and it's clear he wants to decoy the white queen away from protecting c5. But actually I think g6 was a better way to do this. Opposite colour bishop middle games tend to depend on activity, and so what I like about g6 is that it's getting ready for bishop g7, putting the bishop on a really, really active square. And now we can see that all of white's pieces there, the three major pieces and the king, are kind of sitting ducks for the black bishop. So, for instance, if white has to play g3 here, because black's threatening bishop d4, now queen h6 is a good move. And I think black has the upper hand, as he's able to create threats quickly, and white cannot increase the pressure on f7. But Queen h6 going back to the game. Well, white played b4, and this is a really good move as it just anchors the pawn and gives the white pieces more freedom of movement. I mean, clearly black had realised that if white had taken on h6 in this position, then yes, he does have enfeebled pawns, but I think this position is fine for black. He's got plenty of active play, and again, white is hard pressed to gang up on f7 with any threats. So Nakamura plays b4, very good. Aronian took on e3, and he put his rook in on d4, hitting the bishop. Well, Nakamura just retreated. And now came the move g6, once again with the idea of just playing either bishop h6 or bishop g7. Now, just going back, what you've got to do in this sort of position, of course, is to keep active. I mean, it all depends on the initiative. So maybe a5 was also a possibility, with the idea that after rook ef3, black actually takes on b4, ignoring the threat to f7. Obviously, white can take with the rook here and threaten some sort of discovered check. But it turns out that after g6, actually the discovered check is not really dangerous. For instance, if white takes on b7 check, king goes in the corner, takes on b4. Well, black can choose. He can take on c5, or he can play rook d2, which maybe is the best move of all. And just going back, if a5, let's run this variation one more time. Rook f3, a takes b4. If white takes with the bishop check here, rook takes f7 is interesting. And then after rook takes f7, we go bishop takes c5. And once again, is white winning this position? Well, I'm not sure. I mean, maybe let's go a little bit further with this. If white takes on b4 here, rook d7 check, b takes c5, takes. What's happening in this king and pawn ending? And it may be that both players saw this endgame on the board and couldn't quite evaluate it. My estimation is that it is equal, but maybe white has a slight advantage here. It's difficult to imagine that with 3 pawn islands against black's 2, but this pawn on c5 is doing a fantastic job. So, for instance, after king f2, both sides bring their king up, white kills a move, and eventually black's king has to give way. But after king d4, h5, okay, this is going to be difficult to win. White's a bit better, but maybe not a win. So perhaps seeing those variations, Aronian decides to play g6. Rook ef3, rook d to d7. And although natural, protecting f7, this is probably a mistake. What black should do is just go a5 and try and get into one of the lines we just saw. Because after rook d7, after this, Nakamura starts playing incredibly powerfully and shows us just how strong the white initiative can be by playing e5. Here white's just about to translate his weakness, the isolated e-pawn, into a strength by playing e6, and after e6 the black position is starting to become incredibly perilous, if not lost. So by playing passively in this opposite colour bishop middle game, Aronian has condemned himself to defeat. And as I say, now, after this, Nakamura starts playing really powerful chess. e6, black played h5, rook f6, again very powerful play, tying black up. Black moved his king out of harm's way at least, and now h4. Another very, very powerful move, so that if black takes on e6, well, g6 becomes a target. So black plays a5. It looks like g6 is going to become a target anyway, and bishop c2 was white's move. King g7, and hey presto, after e takes f7, suddenly black has no moves left. Rook takes f7, despite reduced material actually, black's king is in real danger here. White could of course play bishop f5 in this position. Again, that would maintain the bind, but the move Nakamura played is equally good. rook f to g3. And now his idea is just to play rook g5 and chop this pawn on h5. Black played bishop g7, white played rook g5 anyway. Black played rook f4, and after rook takes h5 check, king g8, bishop f5 was played, with black in a terrible mess. Once a player like Nakamura, or indeed any world-class player, gets a position like this, you just know they're going to win. They've got the technique, they've got the knowledge, they've got the experience to just finish the job here. White's 2 pawns up, and he's got an attack. The opposite colour bishops can't offer any drawing chances at all. So what black struggles on, white gives up the b pawn in order to get his king to safety on h3, and now he starts to resume his attack. Rook hg5. I mean, I suppose white could play rook h7, but rook hg5 is good. Black moves his bishop in, rook g8 check, king e7, a quiet move, bishop c4, and now rook h5. So with the rook on c7 completely out of the game, and white threatening rook h7, which is a killer blow, Aronian resigned. So a very nice victory there in game 1 of the match for Nakamura. And I should say that actually Aronian quickly levelled the scores in game 2.